It's the Greater Wealth here on Edge Radio Australia. Absolute pleasure to have the gentleman beside me who is the guru when it comes to the Greater Wealth, when it comes to Blue Sky Factory. It's great to see you, Derek Whittaker.
It's always good to be here. Super excited today.
Oh, you are, mate. You're a little fanboy. I'm just going to tell you the honest truth. Yeah, you might be fanboying a little bit, but it's a good thing. It's a very positive thing because we've got a great a great speaker and a man of great knowledge in the studio. Do you want to do the introductions?
Sure. Larry Wood is a multimillionaire from Washington, USA. In recent times, written a couple of books on the prophetic of all things and how it relates to finance and investment. And he's written 2 books called The Parable of the Dinar and Stewarding the Wealth Transfer, a study on Kim Clement's 8 Wells. And also co-authored with Lauren Atkinson, The Rise of Kingdom Billionaires. If you missed our first interview last week with Larry, make sure you check the show notes below. It was fantastic. It was loaded. It was fun. But now he's here in the flesh, in the studio with us. Larry, it's awesome to have you here.
Well, Derek and Aaron, it's really great to be here. And I really enjoyed talking to you guys last week. So thank you very much for letting me come back.
Our pleasure, mate. Great to have you here in the flesh. Really excited that you're here in Perth too, because we discussed this last week. I mean, we're a very isolated little town here, and for strange how the Lord provides and delivered in this particular case.
I have to tell you, I was almost a casualty. This is my 51st country I've been to.
Really?
And the visa system, I thought with the freedom of, a patriot-loving community like, Australia, I didn't know, but I missed my first flight and had to buy a second flight because Singapore Airlines didn't let me know that you had to have a visa. And I just didn't assume because I've been to England. I go to Canada every year.
Yep.
And but as an island nation, I guess it's been this way for a long time. So but none of my American friends, most of them don't make it to Australia, but I learned. So I persevered and I'm here, and I appreciate Paul's encouragement. So
we often say WA, that actually stands for wait a while, right? A bit of a delay in everything, but no, glad you made it, mate. And via Singapore, so you got a little break there, which is great.
Yeah, but I'm excited to be here. So what are we talking about today?
Yep. 30 seconds or less. Let's put some context on it. What is the wealth transfer? For those who didn't catch it last week.
The wealth transfer is, I think that God is sick and tired of people who are evil, that have controlled the world. And I think that God's saying, I'm going to show what it would look like. And so I'm going to give people who fear me a chance. And Kim Clement prophesied there's 8 different investments that are coming. And you know the name of some of these. It's not Bitcoin, but he did prophesy about XRP. He made an amazing prophecy about the Iraqi dinar. And a lot of people, I sent you a video last week of a brigadier general in America that was on a secular station. And he was talking about how he's seeing Iraq and Vietnam and other countries, probably Iran, is the Iran rial has fallen to a dramatic level. So I think there's going to be opportunities of all kinds to invest in. And so that's, I was against it when I first heard about it, but after studying it, I cared prophetically, but I really wanted to know professionally. And after looking at these things, I think that they're real.
Yeah, I've been fascinated watching things happen geopolitically and trying to match up what you're hearing prophetically, and then how does that match up from a finance type of perspective. Some of it you do by faith. You hear and you go, okay, not sure about this one. But other times you hear very accurate prophets, like Julie Green a couple of years ago was prophesied about precious metals going up.
Yes.
So I had looked at her track record and I thought, I'm in, let's do it. And that's paid off very nicely. So yeah, it's been interesting that journey for me too on that level.
Yeah.
I want to talk about something that most people don't cover, and that's a skill called keeping the money. Now, Mike Dillard talks about 3 levels: there's making the money, keeping the money, and investing the money. And those are 3 different mindsets and 3 different skill sets. A lot of people don't talk about that middle one, keeping the money. Are you concerned that some people in this wealth transfer will come into money and not have much to show for it a couple of years later?
Derek, I think that probably 80% will not be holding on to it in 4 years.
Wow.
And if they are not intentional, that's just the way it's going to be. And it's a sad thing. We don't really know each other very well, but I got to be a business owner because my brother invested in me 32 years ago, actually 35 years ago, and he became a professional athlete. And so he played in the NBA for 5 years, and then he played for 7 or 8 years. I say 7 or 8 because he started off making hundreds of thousands, and then he ended up making tens of thousands a year, and so you can keep playing at lower levels. You just hardly cover your expenses. So he played for about 13 years professionally. And so I watched him become rich 3 times. And then I thought, I'll never get to be rich. But when I did, then I thought it'd be easy to hold on to it. And I wasn't able to hold on to it. And I ended up going bankrupt. And so many people who do come into money do. And so I really feel like it's an important thing to be intentional with money. And so I think that there's some rules that I haven't heard somebody say, but they're just what I've kind of learned. And I'd like to, talk about that a little
absolutely.
bit.
What would be the key?
Well, let me ask
things?
you a question, kind of, and you too, Aaron. What do you think is better, being rich or being wealthy, and how would you define the difference? And that's probably subjective. So I'm not going to say there's a right or wrong answer, but
Sure.
I have my own opinion. So I'd be curious what each of you would say. What's more important, to be rich or wealthy, and what is the
I think
difference?
it's more important to be wealthy than rich, personally.
How would you define the two?
Because I define wealth now differently to how I would see it when I was younger. Now I see it as a combination between income and lifestyle. Okay. Whereas before it was about money. Okay. It was about accumulating as much wealth financially. It was about those numbers in the bank. That's how I considered myself wealthy or rich or whatever. Now, I don't, in this stage of my life, don't need anywhere near as much money as I thought I would need because my life is simpler and I would want to marry the lifestyle. I think that's a very important part for me. So it's going to be different for everybody. We've all got a different perspective. To me, money buys freedom. So many people look at money and get very negative about it. Think, you're chasing the dollar. Therefore, you're almost like your ungodly person, almost like greed is your God, if you like. I don't see it that way at all. I see it as gaining the money will actually give you an opportunity to, be more free, to travel to places you want to be, to help the people that you want to help, to free your time so you can actually use it for something that is your life purpose. So to me, that is wealth.
I think that's good. I think it's very interesting that in the church, because I'm a Christian guy, the church feels guilty about wealth, and they don't even want to embrace it if it's available. They almost feel guilty that if it's available. But I think that we need to get our priority right. We need to love God and have our money serve us, but we tend to love money and ask God to help us do what we would like to do. So we kind of get things messed up. What do you think, Derek, about being rich or wealthy? What's better?
Well, defining it's the hard thing. I mean, how do you know when you're rich? What's the number, right? That number's going to be different for different people. Yeah. So I think...
is it true here in Australia that $1 million is the number?
No, not anymore.
No. Used to be. Yeah. The average house price now is probably 1.2 million in Australia.
Right.
And
so is it like 3 then? Is it 3 or 5 or what's the number?
Probably 10. I'm guessing. I don't know.
I don't know. I think there's comfort at 3 and I think there's wealth at 5.
Okay. I think that's interesting. What were you going to say?
Well, I think for me, wealth is more than just money. It's about relationships. It's spiritual in terms of your connection with God. Number one. Number two, he's a relational God. So it's what's your relationship to him, family, and other people outside your family, which is so key. I've been to, as a pastor's kid, I've been to a lot of funerals, and you never hear somebody talk about how much they had in their bank account at their eulogy.
Very true.
You talk about the contribution they made to life. And I think that's the perspective of you can't take it with you. So what you do in this life is so important, but so small compared to eternity. And so you've got to keep that perspective in the game.
Big picture, yeah?
Absolutely. Goes too far. So I think for me, wealth in terms of financially is the kind of, I've said happy tickets in one respect, but they give you choice. They give you a lot of wealth, gives you that ability to make decisions. Do you invest in business?
Money provides options.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's almost all it does. I mean, if you think it's going to make you, there's a feeling that goes along with it, or when you spend it, there's a temporary feeling, but it's it reduces each time you do it. Like one of the things that I've had to learn, and I learned this from other people who had significant wealth. They said if you reward yourself more than once a year, you're probably not going to enjoy. Like if you have to buy a new car every 6 months, it's just going to take all the fun out of it. But if maybe, so I'm to the place where if we need a new car, we will get a new car, but we don't mind driving 6 or 8 year old cars. That's not it. Our image is not what we drive. We do drive nice cars, but I do want a red car made in Italy, and that's like my decade dream. And so I'm just waiting for just the right time. And I think that there's a benefit of waiting, for that. And so I think that's interesting. But I think, could I afford it? Yeah, I could afford it. But if I did, then, and anyway, as people come into this wealth transfer, different people are going to hit it with a different degree. But, let's say somebody came into Australia and say they came into 6 million Australian, which would be significant money anywhere in the world.
Sure.
If they bought their dream house and then they bought 2 dream cars and then they paid off their debt, they probably couldn't afford to live in the house with the residual income that they had. So people need to be skillful when they, come into a liquidity event. And so I think it's an important conversation. What have you thought about how people handle a liquidity event versus what is your goal when you come into money with a liquidity event? And then what do you want to do?
Well, I was going to ask you, before you're going to ask that question,
yes.
I was going to ask you, do you think the wealth transfer will be a windfall, or do you think it'll come slowly acquired over a period of time? That was what I was going to ask you in terms of context.
Well, I do literally believe that there will be government rulings, that at least in America, that will be retribution to reward for offenses that have happened.
Right.
I mean, there's starting to be some legal things with some of the decisions that have been made by prior administrations that there might be, reimbursement. But also, I think for prior taxes, and so I think that money will come whether people invest or not. I think the biggest differential will be in whether people choose to invest or not. And so I think that what's interesting is when I was a kid, I used to think, God, what would it be like to be living a modern day Bible story? And I think that we have the opportunity to participate in a modern day Bible story. What do I mean by that? I mean that we have an opportunity to have faith and engage and not regret, or there will be a lot of people who will say, I knew that was going to happen, and I can't believe I didn't engage. And you go, well, what are you talking about, Larry? Well, what about something as practical as XRP? I just had a conversation in the last couple of days about XRP, the utility of XRP, and yet the price is still so low. So people, it's like, I think God is artificially keeping the price low. It's such an opportunity, but people aren't acquiring it because over the last 2 or 3 years, it hasn't been an amazing investment. But the utility of that cryptocurrency is absolutely amazing.
Well, yeah. And when you're hearing BlackRock talk about they want to tokenize everything across that, and you can see how the exchanges are moving from New York to Texas.
Yes.
And, what the legislation going through with the Clarity Act, that's just the Senate's just pre-approved that now, and you've had the Genius Act before that. It's a matter of time. The technology is going faster than whatever, and America has to get into crypto. America has to be number one there because of the petrodollar agreement not being renewed back in 2024, I think it was, when the UAE wouldn't re-sign it.
Well, this is like where there's 3 P's that I think are important. The prophetic is something I always want to listen to, but I think that we need to balance the prophetic with also what God is saying to you personally. And I think the prophetic holds up to what professionals are saying. And so I don't think now sometimes the prophetic is going to speak and nobody's going to see it coming, but in these wells of blessing that Kim Clement talked about, these 8 wells, there's the professionals in these areas are saying the same thing. That they're advocating for these.
Yeah.
There's new energies that are coming online.
Yeah.
In my own town on the West Coast in Washington State, kind of between Seattle and Portland, there's a new company that is using food refuse, food like old food. I guess they're keeping it somehow from restaurants, and they're using biomes or whatever, and they're making natural gas out of wasted food.
Is that right?
And so it's like new green energy technology, but that's very similar to the big E that Kim Clement was talking about. And so he talked about there's going to be things in the soil, and there's going to be new technology that's happening. So I don't know. I'll let you.
Yeah, look, I think it's incredible to watch the prophetic be declared and then seeing things happen around you that kind of go, well, I can see this falling in line with what's being declared here.
Yeah.
It's an exciting journey to watch that. And the journo in me loves to watch that, as Aaron will tell you. I want to get back to, if we could, just in your experience, how does having great amounts of wealth change somebody? Because somebody who hasn't had it before and somebody, they come into it.
Well, when, you know, like, I'll say that I have a lot of debt, so I'll even kind of talk about it broadly. We have in the upper 20s millions worth of property that we have, and we have over 10 million in debt. And so you can kind of do the math and come up with, it's a pretty significant amount, and we could just exit out. But I think the reason that we ended up with it is because we were so conservative, and kind of going back to being rich or wealthy. I think that people have a philosophy of money. And if you think that money is to make you happy and it should be a reward for your effort, then I don't know if you'll ever be wealthy. You can definitely be rich. And I think many people who are rich, and I think people who are rich, you know, they might be making, I can speak better in American money, but like, you know, 200 or 300,000 a year is an awful lot of money for most people.
That
don't
puts
make
you
that
in the
much.
top 1% in the US, I believe.
It would actually take a little bit more. I think over 450 to be, I think in the 1% in the United States.
Okay.
But if you do that, if you have a philosophy of money, that you just want to reward yourself, you can easily consume it all. There's no limit to what, you know, people can just spend on themselves. So I really feel like to educate people, everybody thinks they know how, well, everybody knows how to spend money. So everybody just makes this assumption, I know how to spend money, therefore I know how to invest money. But investing is a whole different thing. When I was having a business where I became a home builder and I started making a lot of money, I was doubling my income almost every year. And when you do that, it's easy to think I should live twice as good. But we somehow, because I think of what I've read Rich Dad Poor Dad. I've read hundreds of books, honestly, on finance. And so the reason we had a rich mentality or a wealthy mentality of money. And so if my income would jump 100%, my lifestyle would only go up 5 or 6%. And then I would invest the rest. And I think that's the biggest reason why we did it, because when you have significant money, you have these significant business adventures, you have wild swings that people couldn't even imagine.
You need a buffer.
Yeah. I mean, we can get hit for $100,000 in taxes. I mean, our taxes went up over $100,000. Come
on, Larry. If you want taxes, come to Australia. We specialize.
Well, when that happens, it's hard to recover, you know, and so you learn from all the mistakes that you make, and I think I've made a lot of mistakes, but I think that I want to encourage people to think through it. And so I want to throw out a number. If you had a liquidity event, let's say you came up with 10 million, okay? Let's say two people, one person had 10 million, one person had 20. What would be a percentage that would be reasonable to spend so that you would, because if you feel like this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, how can you be sure that you can hold on to this? And so there's a 4% rule, right, in investing. But I don't think that that's been over time always substantiated. So I would even be more conservative than that. And I would tell people if they would take 1 or 2% of their lump sum and they divide that by 12, then I think that they would be able to make a lot of mistakes and they would be able to recover from it, you know.
Right.
And so I would really encourage people to, you know, think of that. And you might be going, well, that's not very much fun to be rich like that, because that's not a lavish lifestyle. No, it's not. Because do you want a lavish lifestyle for a couple of years, or do you want to begin to set yourself up and your kids? One of the things that I wrestle with, and I've been talking to Paul about, is how do you move wealth in the Western society? I think we've been lied to that we have no idea how to move money to future generations. Because if you give it to them, they will not hold on to it. You know, so how do you teach them? And, you know, Israel takes a lot of lumps, but one thing everybody in the world would admit, that they do a great job of moving money from one generation to the next. What do they do that we don't do?
Yeah.
A couple of points. I mean, obviously, this is a conversation. This is not financial advice.
Yeah.
We're talking about our situations, our theories and thoughts. But, okay, I find when you're talking about such a low percentage, I find that really strange, because I think the people who are going to be seeking wealth, people who are entrepreneurs by nature, are going to be more of a risk taker. Now, I'm not saying – so, I mean, if it was me, I'll lay the numbers down. If I had 10 million, I would spend 2 million pretty quickly. Right. And then I would use 8 million to maintain that lifestyle. That's how I would go. Do you think that's not a sustainable percentage?
Well, it's because I've studied what this wealth transfer is. And so let me describe it. I don't think that that's that's not improper logic, but let me say this.
Sure.
There is a 4-year time that this wealth transfer, Kim Clement prophesied this wealth transfer would come. So if you took 2 million, you get that in the first 3 months. You've got 3.5 years of the best opportunity for investment that you've ever seen in your entire life. You take 2 million out of that pool. So what if you invest that for the next 4 years? And then, so what I would recommend is that people do need to move their liquidity event into cash flow, because when you spend money, if somebody's ever gone into direct sales or whatever, where they can have wild fluctuations, like realtors in America, I think it's probably the same here. Real estate people in a hot real estate market, realtors can be ordinary people. They get into real estate, all of a sudden they're making 30 or 40,000 a month, and then they won't make anything for 3 months, and then they'll make 80,000 if they get really lucky. And so, how do you live like that? Well, if you live like a regular factory worker, just how much money do I have in my bank? I can spend all that money. Well, you get used to that after 3 or 4 years, spending 20,000 a month or whatever. Then a more regular economy comes, you can't hold on to that money. So I think that we need to be very intentional. And even though I have extra money, we have a budget of, we just pull so much out, and that's what we live off of. And so as what's weird, we don't have a budget looking ahead, but we look at our budget going backwards. So probably 2 months a year, 2 out of 12 months, we don't put enough money in to spend it. I mean, we need more.
Okay.
So there's always more there.
We do the top up.
We can go get it, but we're not concerned about how much we spend. We just put so much in. You know, it's a conservative percentage of our lifestyle. And then that's how we do it. So it's interesting to me that a lot of people get worried, I can't do a budget, I don't know. Well, when you have a lot of money, you don't care what you're going to spend, because you're going to do whatever you need to do. But you can look backwards and say, okay, I started with 12,000 is what I thought I was going to spend. And it took 15 because we did that trip or whatever. So I think that's an interesting thing of how to think. But people need to move the money towards a cash flow investment, because you live off a monthly allotment. A huge amount of money doesn't do you any good. You can quickly $6 million if you spend 500,000 a year, you're only going to last 12 years, and it's all gone.
Yeah, plus taxes.
So you've got to turn it into cash flow.
It's I agree. That's been kind of in my mindset in terms of the wealth transfer is how do we turn that into cash flow, those assets, and doing lots of research on that, which is really interesting. It's great when somebody confirms how you've been thinking. It's like cool. There's a synchronicity there. What do you think about this? Should people who come into wealth try to stay low profile? You're not doing that. You're not doing that.
I know. Well,
because a lot of the wealthy people I've come across, they're very private people.
Yeah. I think it's probably wise to do that. But I think that there's a responsibility with wealth. And here's the thing. I call it conspicuous consumption. The billionaires of the world, I don't think Musk is a conspicuous consumption person anymore. I mean, he was earlier in his life, post PayPal. He really was. I mean, he's like such a different person. It really makes you wonder.
Sure.
He's so different. But so many people just, they go to Monaco, they watch the Grand Prix. It's just, all about where they can park their boat and then which estate they can rent. And that's conspicuous consumption. I think the world is going to see godly people who are going to be leveraging. They're going to live a very nice lifestyle. They're not going to always have the finest cars, or they're going to buy a very fine car and keep it for 10 or 12 years. And then they're going to make a huge difference. And they're not going to spend, you don't need to spend a huge percentage of your wealth. At a certain point, how much do you need to spend?
How many sports cars do you need?
Well, hang on, mate.
You're the wrong person to ask on that.
I once had 9. Okay. Yeah. Bad example. No,
but you were in the gig.
I was in the exactly.
You're in the industry.
Exactly.
So you're using parts from all different, right?
Of course I was. And they're all for tax.
We'll justify it.
We will find every way to justify it. But an interesting point that I found about having wealth or money, however you want to describe it, is the amount of disingenuous people who enter your life. That was the biggest thing. So talking about hiding the wealth or not being particularly forthcoming about what you've got, I have discovered when I have been at my lowest financially, when I've been really struggling, when your life has been really tough, I get the best people. The people who actually step up into my life and the people who maintain friendships and relationships with me, they're much better, much higher quality people. So, I mean, how do you find that from that issue of being ostentatious about it or being open about it? Do you think that is a problem?
Well, I get a lot of people that ask for money.
Yep.
And
I was going to wait till we get off air, but
well, here's my advice to people when they come into money. You can't finance somebody's lifestyle. You can help them with their needs.
Sure.
Obviously, if your relatives, if they're getting kicked out of their house, maybe they have just bit off more than they can chew, and maybe it's not. They do need a place to be. They absolutely need food. And so I would never turn somebody down for that, but people don't ask for that. They're like, I want to go on this trip that I don't need to go on. I want to live way beyond my lifestyle, needs. And so I think it's an important thing that you don't want to, when I tell people and they come to me, I say, my wife and I, this is an odd thing to say, we've made our goal, and God has helped us to do it for 5 years, that we've been able to give more than what we've lived off of.
Okay.
So when we came into significant money, we decided to be generous. And so I would advocate for that. It's been a very great thing, but it's helped me have a response when people ask for money, because I say, we give significantly, and we are always refining what we give to try to be the most effective in the whole world. So you're competing against every need that we're continually piling up, and then we're refining what we give, because we give more than $10,000 a month away. And so if we do that, you're asking for this. How many missionaries in Africa do you not want us to finance? How many kids on feeding programs do you not want us to give? Because that's what we're doing, and this is what we're led to do. So, I mean, some people don't really care, but I think you need to have a philosophy of what you're giving. And I hope that people, when they come into this wealth transfer, they don't think that it's only for their individual lifestyle. I think that God is looking for people that he wants to bless who will seek first the kingdom of God. And I think that we need to learn how to live that out.
Strange point here. Do you think you might be interfering when you give to people who are, and I'm not talking about missionary, I'm not talking about situations, I'm not talking about people who genuinely need, people who might be talking about that holiday or whatever.
Yeah.
When you give to them or you bail them out financially, are you maybe interfering with God's lessons?
Well, I'm not usually the one that does give to them. So
There you go. There you go.
But I, it's odd, it's odd. The way
I'm not
that
being
people
critical
are.
by
Yeah,
any stretch
yeah,
of imagination. I just, it's sometimes, people need to fall because they need to rise again. Okay. And they need to learn that lesson. And I think a lot of people put their hand out and they kind of look at you and go, he's got more than me.
Well, and I'm somebody who lived in an amazing, very large house that people in the town called it the Castle House.
Right.
And then 2008 came along and it became evident that we were going to lose it.
Yep.
And we tried to negotiate with Bank of America and we ended up losing it. So I've my brother says, because he's done this 3 times, he goes, I've been rich and I've been poor, and being rich is better. But, I've been rich and I've been poor. And so it's not fun to go down economically. It's really hard to live on 25% of what you used to live off of. But I've done it, and I think I'm better off for it. And so, and I think my kids are way better off. I wonder what my kids would have been like if they would have always had the silver spoon in their mouth. And so, I don't know, that's an interesting thing. And I think about it, and I've been talking to Paul about how do you, legacy is what you do for the next generation, how you help them to step into what they were meant to do. And I really wrestle with it. I don't think in the West we understand that, and we should have a command of and a plan. But I wrestle with it. I don't actually know. I know what's wrong, but I don't know exactly the best way to do that. And I don't know that there's a one-step method to do it perfectly. What do you think?
I think you've got to be led by God and going, coming back to, we were talking about this before we went on air. There's that verse of, you wrote all the days while I was still in my mother's womb. And the funny thing about that is you had no say in it. So you either yield to it or you try to resist it. I have personally found it easier to yield to it, even though I might not like it all the time, to go with that and go, all right, Lord, help me. It's funny because in terms of investments and stuff like that, I've really kind of changed my tune than I was 10 years ago. There's a lot of ways to make money, and there are principles and wisdom that you have to have. But there's also the component of, what are you on, God? What is your Holy Spirit on? I want to be in that flow, particularly when it comes to if you have a perspective of kingdom. What is it that you're about to do on the earth? You know what's coming up better than anyone. I don't know what's going to be around the corner. Lead me. And I think there's more of a dependence. I used to think that the more you grew in God, the more independent you would be. And I found the opposite to be true. The more reliant you are on him. And I think that's the key, is the weight of the wealth. It's like, Lord, Solomon goes, you look at the richest man that ever was, Solomon. He's going, you've given and trusted me with all these people to govern, I need your help.
Yeah.
Give me wisdom.
I have a question about that in that regard. I've asked myself this many times. Is it more, is it wiser to admit that you don't know things, so as I grow older, I'm 63, I'm realizing there's more and more things I don't know. Perfectly. I mean, I think I'm definitely wiser and I have more acumen than I used to, but there's more and more things I don't know. Like one of the things, just in talking about legacy and moving money to future generations, we haven't yet directly given money to our kids, but we're to the point where why would we stockpile it? Because they have to learn how to handle it. So here's the thing that I've come to the conclusion. I really feel like parents, when they give money to their kids the first time, like to their adult children, and I'm talking significant money. So let's talk about over 250 Australian $100,000. Okay.
Okay.
Significant money, half a house,
Yeah.
you know, or a third of a house, whatever, where you live. What if your kids do something stupid with it? And they're in their 20s or 30s. I think that we have to let them make the poor decisions. And then that decision has to impact what we do in the future, because I'm not convinced that we need to be equal. For some reason in Western society, we feel like we have to be 100% equal. I don't know. Well, that's not, I don't know. That's an interesting
question. Here's a little theory, and I'll sort of ask you both on this one. So we'll use your hypothetical $250,000, which in Australia is about enough to buy a Happy Meal at McDonald's, right? So you got your 250.
Yeah.
What about if you, say, when your children turn, say, 18, you release 100,000 to them as a bit of a tester? Like this year, I want to see how they react. I want to see what they do. I want to see if they build it or waste it. What do you think of that as a concept?
That's almost exactly my concept. I mean, my goal is to buy, because I believe in this wealth transfer. I'm leaning into it. I think that God is saying to people, he's calling people out and saying, I have called you, I've destined you to be a person of significance. Just like Abraham, Isaac, they were a person of great affluence, and they became a person of influence. And I think that the legacy that I'm supposed to do is I want to acquire. I think in America, we have a way different housing market than you.
Yeah,
we have it's already going down significantly, like 15 to 20% in many markets down in the last 12 months.
Sure.
And so I feel like there's going to be an opportunity to buy a house for each one of my grandkids. And and what I think is beautiful about it, I'm going to buy them for me until I totally have the ability to give it to them. And so I can live off that money. So maybe I'll buy 8 houses,
right, single
family houses. And then when my kids get to be 18 to 20, my grandkids, I want to give those houses to them. That's exactly what I want to do. But some of them are going to screw it up. And so what I want to do is I don't just want to give it to them. I want to say, hey, there's rents coming off that house. I don't need to live off of it. So you're 15 years old. Let's have a 3-day weekend together with grandma and grandpa. And you got 12 months of rent, of proceeds that we're going to invest together. And let's begin to speak into their life and see what they do with it. But if they make a good decision, there would be more. And if they make a really poor decision or just have no value of money, then I don't feel like I need to be equal with all the distributions of my family.
Well, you just talked about education, and obviously this is exactly what you do. This is exactly what you do at Blue Sky Factory. And you can have all the money in the world. If you don't actually have the education of the smart way to play it, to move forward, then you do pilfer it away. Most people do. That's why we know that people who come into money generally lose it. So I commend you on that. I think that the education part of the 3-day weekend is a very smart idea.
It's great.
What are your thoughts there?
Well, I've heard of other families that have regular family meetings. Like they'll book out a resort or something like that. Yeah. And they'll have time where kids have fun on the playgrounds and all this sort of stuff, in water park or whatever, wherever they booked in. But they'll also book out an office space in that resort and work through it. We got to teach the generations how to manage this. And I think, you got to have those kind of conversations. Because it's about, I think there's a tension as a parent. You don't want to be going, if this isn't your God-given destiny, we don't want you to get doing something you don't want to do and you're not supposed to be doing. But at the same time, how are you going to manage it well? Yeah. And I say that in terms of, there's often an expectation from business owners. I want to pass this on to my child, the business.
Sure.
That child may not want to do that business. And I think there's got to be those conversations.
These 20-somethings that we've got now are really, and they're not the same, but I think across Western society, there are similar values. My 2 children are 27 and 30 years old, and they have such a different view of money than a baby boomer. Like, I'm the last year of the baby boomers in the United States. And so it's frustrating when your kids don't value money the way that you do. But that's got to be my fault. I have to own that. And the thing is, I have to work with it. And it's not necessarily maybe even moral. It's just, it's a value that is, I kind of like it that they don't like money, but they don't really, they're not going to compromise their.
I'm going to disagree with you. Sorry.
The question I would ask is, have they gone through the struggle that you've gone through?
No, they've not.
And I think that's a defining moment. If you've gone through the struggle, you value it when you have it, because when you didn't have it, you missed it.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I think that's a big defining point.
Thoroughly agree. And the other point, that's exactly where I was going on that one. The other one is the indoctrination, quite frankly, through the education system has look, we've been breeding socialists for a very long time. Let's be very frank. The education system has been a disgraceful indoctrination center for a very long time. Whether we talk about, I mean, just the degenerate behavior that's being pushed on people right now, that's, completely against anything of a moral level. But yeah, this demonization of money too. It's crazy. As I say, well, it's crazy. I'm Gen X, and my generation, I certainly learnt from my parents, was very much about accumulating wealth because it did create freedom from an opportunity, whereas they don't see it that way. So yeah, it's on one thing to blame ourselves for not teaching them, but the other side is we've been fighting against quite a demon.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you a funny story. I don't think my daughter will hear this. I hope didn't hear this story. But I was talking about my son, who's way more financially oriented than my daughter's 30. My son is 27. And I said, well, I just want to have a conversation about money because we don't really talk about it, but there's going to, there's significant assets that are going to come to you. And, but she goes, well, you're going to be fair, right? And I go, oh yeah, it'll be fair, but it won't be equal. What? What do you say, Dad? I said, it will be fair, but it will not be equal. And she goes, well, what does that mean? I said, well, I'm a little bit like the little red hen. There's a story in America, probably here. But if you want to help and you want to work and you want to borrow family money, and you would be putting your part of your inheritance at risk. Mm-hmm. But if you want to grow it, then we would love to work with you in that. But if you don't want to do anything and we've made these offers to you and you don't want to work with it, then you're going to get a good amount, far more than most people would ever hope to get. But your brother might choose to work and grow it. Mm-hmm. And so I don't want it to be equal. I want it to be fair, but to me, fair isn't equal. So she goes, you're not going to split it? And I said, no, I'm not going to split it equally, because if you don't want to have anything to do with growing it, then you're not going to make more to give away for the kingdom. It's gotcha. It's just not to consume for yourself. So
it's an interesting one, how, I've seen that with my clients. You come into some money and they've helped a kid buy out one of their homes, and then that's caused issues amongst the other siblings, going, well, there's favoritism and this sort of stuff, and it comes up with all these sort of issues. Since we're on this kind of path, what are your thoughts on using family offices? And for those who don't know who family offices are, they're private investment groups that help the wealthy manage their funds in different investment classes. So what's your view on that?
Well, I have I have an interesting caveat. And I might, get into an ethereal conversation here. Family offices take advantage of tax law at a very high level.
Okay.
It's my prediction that taxes will not be the same thing. So, and I think that taxes might be changing. And
I'm just going to point to this gentleman in the corner.
Yeah.
Just for a moment.
Our president is now not taxing tips. Yeah. And he's not taxing overtime. Mm-hmm. And he's saying more and more that tariffs are going to probably take the majority of taxes away. Well, I don't think that that's only going to be in America. I think that the world will follow. And that's what I think. So I think that family offices are smart. But I also don't want my kids to have the raw tension of, it would be my goal that even if I had a big, I'd rather split it, even if they're not exactly equal. I have two kids. So it might be 60-40, it might be 55-45, it might be 70-30. However it gets split, I want it to be two separate things. I don't want one of my kids controlling my other kids' assets that would create a lot of tension. And that's my personal opinion, but I don't know. Some families could do it. I don't think ours would.
Okay. Interesting. And speaking of that, a lot of folks in Australia right now are really disappointed in the government's announcements on tax changes to financial structures with family trusts and capital gains tax with that speech on the financial budget and all this sort of stuff. And
Wow.
Are basically feeling like no matter how hard they try, the odds are against them to get ahead. You've just come out of the Biden era and you were talking about the tariffs and that sort of stuff.
Yes.
What would you say to people feeling this way in Australia right now? And also in light of the whole wealth transfer.
Let me say this. I might be rabbit trailing, but I think this is an important topic. I don't know how many years you think people have been on the earth, but most people believe far more than 10,000. If you believe in the short earth theory, 6,000 years or whatever. So how many years has the world had fiat currency at the same time? I'm going to say that in all of the world's history, let's just say it's only 6,000 years, but of humans, or maybe other people, like they get all crazy, 50,000 years of humans or whatever. For 50 years, there's been fiat currency around the world. That is like such a small percentage. It's like nothing. Yeah. And we think it's going to stay the way that it's been just because in our adult lives, that's the only way it's been. I think that's crazy. So I think that people need to think with a historical perspective and realize, and I'm thinking that we are going to move out of a fiat-based system. And if you believe that, then you have a wildly different view of everybody else. But the world starts making sense. And so in my own country, our state is now some of the most aggressive taxes. We have new estate taxes and then a wealth tax if you make more than $1 million a year. And so if I have capital gains, it would affect me. And so what I'm doing is I'm holding my assets, and I think whether it's crypto or precious metals, real estate, I can't do anything super creative with that. But I think that people are silly to not hold their assets. And then if I move to a different state or move to a different country, those assets will go with me. Mm-hmm. And I'm willing to do what I need to do to be creative with taxes. And if I have the physical assets, and so some people don't realize what the future of our money, I think it will probably return to the way that it's always been. I think, so to be blunt, I think we're headed towards a future where currency will be once again commodity backed, like it's been 99% of the time that humans have been on the world. And so if you believe that, which is total counterculture to what our leaders and the elites are saying, then you would invest far differently. So that's what I'm doing.
We've talked on this show how Julie Green has prophesied that the Federal Reserve will disappear and the IRS and stuff like this. And this was back in 2022, 2023.
Well, you don't think that Kevin Warsh or whatever his name is not a tool to accomplish that?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I saw a clip of him this morning talking about the Bitcoin and the value of Bitcoin. I'm going, this is not banker speak. It's totally against what the globalists have wanted.
Just want to pop this in though. Okay, so a lot of people who might be watching this might be going, what are they talking about with fiat systems? What are they talking about to change 50 years ago? It's not common knowledge to the greater part of the population. I know we're very comfortable with it, but obviously the gold standard was taken over, was taken off rather, money in the early 70s. Fiat system, basically, fractional lending and all of these things. If you do want to learn more about it, get in contact with this guy, honestly. blueskyfactory.com.au. Get on to blueskyfactory.com.au. It will change your perspective. There's so many people who don't know about this. We're comfortable because we've been talking about it for a long time.
It's every day for us.
It is every day for us.
Yeah.
But it's such an important thing to know. When you understand the system, you can understand how you can gain the greatest from it.
I love how Larry's come in today with his own notes. So, Larry, I want to open up to you. I don't normally do this with a guest, but with you, I definitely. What do you want to talk about? What in the final parts of this interview? What would you like to talk about?
Well, I think that people need to realize they don't. You can't understand what you haven't experienced. You need to develop mentors. I think there's so many things that I'm going to say that I think the Bible is going to become more and more relevant. In America, there's so many things, so many restaurant chains have been eliminated because of private equity. Private equity comes in, buys these chains, whether they're chains of air conditioning or accountants or whatever, this group of businesses that for 50 million or 100 million or 300 million can be bought out. And then they just jack the prices, they ruin the brand, and then they resell it to another group of private equity. And then usually after the second bite, they call it in private equity, that brand is usually done. There's repeated things that have been ruined. And I think that the Bible talks about, if you want to be the greatest, you got to be the servant of all. That is totally counterculture to what I've gotten in arguments with my business savvy friends, and they think business is based on greed and it's a good thing. And I have rentals and I have a self-storage business, mini storage, and we are not greedy, but we do raise our rates and we're wise, but we want to bring value. We want to serve people. And I think that we're going to learn that people who are greedy, that serve themselves, are not going to be long in the winning business world. And so I think that we need to have Christian mentors. And I think that there's going to come a time, I think things are changing in the church. And I think that there are business leaders that are rising up, and they're going to take younger people and they're going to help them become, I think that God is calling out business people to rise up. And I think there's business women that they've got a vision and a passion, but they don't know how to do it. And I think that people are going to be coming together and getting together, and there's going to be wisdom and insight, and people are going to accomplish amazing things because they're not going to be greedy. They're going to serve people. They're going to do very well. They're not living to see the most they can make in the next 3 years. They've got a 50-year goal. They want to move this business on to future generations. And I've got friends who have made probably $100 million because they sold their businesses to, as a builder. I was hanging around with a lot of people that had a lot of money, and they would not sell to their kids because they didn't know if they could trust their kids. So they would sell to private equity, and then the money is just gone, and their kids are not going to have a business. So I think that we need to have, I think it's going to become popular again to be biblical and to not be greedy. So I guess, that's what I'm saying. And I think that there's amazing good things that are going to come. It seems like evil is winning. I don't think evil's going to win. I think good things are.
And it's interesting you say that, because there's this narrative about this Joseph anointing where preparing for good times ahead, store up, reinvest, and then during famine you can help people. What's your view on that narrative?
I'm a lot more optimistic. I do think the church is going to have an opportunity to make a big difference. I don't think the world is, I personally don't think we're going to see the Antichrist manifesting the way that so many people expect him to.
You haven't met my ex-wife.
I'm more optimistic, but I think there's going to be a lot of people who regret that they didn't take advantage of the things that they saw. I think people can either say, I'm going to be motivated by fear, or I'm going to be motivated by faith. People of faith are going to take risks. They're going to invest. People of fear are going to say, I don't want to risk. I don't want to invest. I'm going to continue this life I don't like, but I'm too afraid to do anything different. And I think that there's encouragement for people who want to make a change. And that change can affect not only your life, but future generations, because you're willing to take the risk. And, I went an unusual way, and I have no regret that I did. But, I could have avoided pain, but there's been many wins that have come. And I think that God is talking to people and saying, you are made for more. There is more that I intend for your life. And I think if you're hearing that, I think he wants to meet you, and I think he wants to help you. And I think that there's encouragement that's available for that. And I think we're going to see amazing things happen. So I'm optimistic about the future, but I think, people are going to have a chance. Do they want to be motivated by fear, or do they want to be motivated by faith?
Super appreciate, Larry, your time today, your
so
wisdom
much
that you've given us. Larry's going to be in various venues around Perth that if you want to catch up with him, Paul, you've promoted. What's the best way to get in touch with you or find that information? Paul at onechurchnetwork.com is the email. Paul can send you that information. It's happening this week, and he's going all the way from Mandurah right up to along the coast there of Perth. Not doing any other, unfortunately, other states at this time, but just Perth. So it's a bit of an exclusive. Larry, it's been fantastic. Thank you so much for taking time out with us today in your busy schedule, and we hope you enjoy your time here in Western Australia.
Well, thank you so much. It's been really fun to get to see the studio really exists. It's got a cool vibe, and thanks for letting me come, Aaron and Derek. So thank you so much.
I'll sign out if you're choking.
My apologies to everybody. Got a little bit of the lurgy. Of course, it pops up at the moment I need to speak, but thank you very much. Send us out.
So, guys, look, if you want to get in touch with us, please do through our website, blueskyfactory.com.au without the E. You're watching this on Edge Radio Australia. Larry Wood, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll catch you next time on The Great.